Welcome to Side by Side, a podcast where I, Robert Kuang, take you inside conversations with artists, creatives, healers, and warriors taking the charge in their transformational story. Today's guest is Sam Bennett, the author of Get It Done, Start Right Where You Are, and most recently, The 15-Minute Method, the surprisingly simple art of getting it done. A writer, speaker, actor, and creativity/productivity specialist. She's the founder of therealsambennett.com, a company committed to helping overwhelmed creatives and frustrated overachievers get unstuck. Sam is also a popular course instructor on LinkedIn Learning with over 1 million class participants worldwide. In this conversation, we talk about her journey of modeling the 15-minute method while completing this book, the way arts and humanities can disrupt disengagement in the workplace, and the myth of laziness and overwhelm. You can find more side-by-side conversations at sidebysidepodcast.podbean.com. And if you'd like to connect with me about my services, please visit www.robertquanhome.com. All right, so I am here today and I'm so happy to be speaking with Sam Bennett, the author of her latest book, The 15-Minute Method. So I always like to start with saying congratulations on the release of your new book. Have you had a chance to celebrate? How does it feel?
Thank you very much. Have I had a chance to celebrate? I don't know. That's a great question. I'm not sure that I have. I mean, it really has been kind of a dead run. I mean, we went from having the idea to this book to being published in just a little bit over a year.
Oh, wow.
400 days or something. So you're right. I think I need to schedule a little celebration time. Thank you.
A little 15-minute. Exactly.
Yeah, even just for 15 minutes.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, and yes, you should absolutely celebrate, even though I know this is not your first rodeo. You've written several books. But based on that, has this experience, writing this particular book, has it been any different compared to previous experiences?
It was very different. And I have to say, each book is really its own thing. I mean, and I think those of us who get heavily engaged in the creative process know that, like, doing one show is very different than doing another show. Yes, you accumulate some transferable skills, but they're all very much their own animal. This book was particularly, unusual for me. I've had long haul COVID for the last 2.5 years. So going from the person who, my first book's called Get It Done. Like, I was like,
right.
Let's make it happen person. And to all of a sudden be the person who not only can't get up out of bed, but like rolling over feels sort of ambitious.
Right.
And all of a sudden, and I couldn't work out and I couldn't go for a walk and I was having trouble really cognating very well. And I still have some of those problems. And so I really became my own walking advertisement. I was like, well, spend 15 minutes on it, get a couple of words down. Maybe this afternoon you can do another 15 minutes. And I often felt it's getting really confessional now, but I often felt really lost during the creation of this book. Sure. I remember saying to a friend of mine, like, I'm not really sure where this book is going. Like, usually I start out with a pretty firm idea of, what it is I want to say. And I was like, I don't know. This one feels like, like I'm just kind of wandering around the garden picking flowers. And I'm not sure if it's really going to make a bouquet or if it's just going to look like a big mess.
Creativity.
Is it charmingly eclectic?
Yeah.
Or is it a big mess?
Right.
Luckily, I had some great advisors, and the team at New World Library is exceptional. And I think in the end, we ended up with a book that I really love and probably would not have written if I had planned it out more carefully or even if I'd had more energy, really. Kind of odd to say.
Yeah, no, thank you for that vulnerability. When I was reading it, the question kept coming up in my head, which is like, I really want to know who you wrote this for, or if you had a type of person in mind. And, writers have all kinds of responses to that question. But yeah, who did you write this for?
The word I hear over and over and over again is overwhelm. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so overwhelmed. I was feeling the need for a crusade to put a stop to the use of that word. Overwhelm and busy. These two, I'm like, Drop it, you guys. We have to drop it. You're not overwhelmed. Overwhelm is not something that happens to you from the outside. It is something you do to yourself from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we know this because when we look at people who work in overwhelming conditions, people who work in the ER, first responders. I was getting interviewed on the news the other day for the little sort of midday news chat show.
Mm-hmm.
And the newscaster said, oh, she said, like when we're, out in the field and there's a breaking story and sometimes it's something really tragic or awful or just something really chaotic and we don't really know what's happening. I'm like, right, exactly. That can be a really overwhelming situation, but she herself is not overwhelmed. She's a newscaster. She's doing her job. The
Right.
person behind the counter at the ER is not overwhelmed. They're doing their job, right?
Right.
They're calm. They're fine. They often have a really great sense of humor, even, which is wonderful. So we can see that it is not the external circumstances of our lives that overwhelm us. It's us and our thinking about our lives. So, and this feeling of the thing that people have been doing throughout all of human history of like spending way too much time thinking about the world at large and all the things we can't control and not spending nearly enough time and energy on the things that our hands and feet can do right now.
Right. And that's where the book starts. Because, when I opened the book, I was like, the 15-minute method. And I was like, okay, maybe this will help me be more efficient or be more organized. But as you dove into it, I was like, oh, no, this is about addressing some things about the human condition, particularly over the past few years, you know. And when you talk about overwhelm, I highlighted a section from your book, and I just like to read it real quick. It's a paragraph.
Great.
Here's what can happen when you refuse to find 15 minutes a day for something that matters to you. You feel like you're on a hamster wheel, permanently exhausted, drained, discouraged. Everything feels hard. You push yourself each day to get everything done, but still feel like you're falling behind. By the end of the day, you feel so deprived you stay up late, doom scrolling, staying awake to revenge grab some time for yourself, even though you know it will only make you more tired tomorrow. I mean, did you just describe everybody over the past few years?
Are people's
well
hands
done.
raised? Is everybody feeling a little called out right now?
Yeah. I mean, I really want to acknowledge the fact that this isn't just like, here's how you can achieve something, right? Like achievement or just to get it done, But
Right.
you're really talking about spending 15 minutes to devote yourself to something that can meet all those needs that we have had to sacrifice in order to kind of get her done in the modern society, right?
Right.
But how can we discern like what we pick when it comes to this invitation of doing something just for 15 minutes? What are some things that we should consider?
So it certainly does work for just general productivity. I mean, if you've got a big project, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Like it will definitely help you with stuff like that. But you're right. My call to action is much more around finding things that delight you. What I notice is that we get everything done for everybody else all day. And the thing that we know would really make a difference to us, to our body, to our spirit, to our mind, doesn't even make it on the list. So I want to put that first, right? I want you to be taking time for the stuff that matters to you first. Just like the oxygen mask, we know that when we fill ourselves up first, when we take time for that prayer and meditation practice, when we take time to play guitar, when we take time to sit in the garden with the sun on our face, when we take time to connect with an old friend, when we take time to do whatever it is that really lights us up inside, all of a sudden everything else kind of gets a little better, There's a little light in your eyes, you're less reactive, you're a better listener. Like, we love this version of you. So please take the initiative for yourself. And you were asking, like, how do we know what to do? Well, that's the beauty of it, right? Anything you like, and it's only 15 minutes, so play around, like.
You have a great list, by the way, because, we've seen so many lists of possible actions and activities and what to do. But when I read your list of, I think it was like 52 things, it was fairly early in the book, so readers will definitely catch it. I love that list. I was like, okay, I see where you're coming from. Get outside the box already. A little bit. That's what I felt, right?
A little bit, sure. And again, for those of us who are highly creative people or highly sensitive people or ADD, ADHD, neurospicy of all the flavors, whatever, this 15-minute thing can really help because you're not committing the rest of your life to it. It's like, I'm going to experiment with I've got a list of these 20 things I want to try. Great. I'm going to pick this one because it's sort of singing out to me today. I'm going to do 15 minutes on it. Maybe I'll do it again tomorrow, and maybe I'll do it again for a couple of weeks. And then maybe I'll switch, or maybe I'll pick a different thing every day. Or maybe I'll spend 15 minutes staring at a blank piece of paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
15 minutes of enforced boredom never hurt a person. Like, when was the last time you spent 15 minutes without reaching for your phone?
Yes. Okay. I see what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah. 15 minutes
And
stillness. That's what it is, right?
just
Kind of.
stillness, just like
Yeah.
be there with your own thoughts for a second. I was, it's summer right now when we're having this conversation, and I'm thinking
Yeah.
back to when I was a little kid and I grew up in Chicago, and we would often go on camping trips or road trips. And, that drive from Chicago to Door County is long. And we would make a fort in the way back of the Volvo, and just hours of just staring out the window, watching that Midwestern blue sky go by. Like, I feel like a couple hours of enforced boredom is really good for a person.
Yeah. No, because sometimes I feel like people hanging out is considered boring now. Like everything has got to be super high level experiential thing. Do you know what I mean? Versus like two people just like catching up,
Hanging
right?
out. Or they're hanging out, but they're also on their phones at the same time.
Yeah, there you
It's
go.
like, no,
Yeah.
no, just be with each other in real time. Be with the actual person in real time. Try that.
Right.
Just try it. 15 minutes. Don't, then go to the phone. I'm not saying become a hermit and live in the woods unless that appeals to you. But for 15 minutes, you can be first and your
Yeah.
interests can be first. And what I notice is that it is astonishing how much a person can get done in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is astonishing how much a person can get done in 15 minutes every day for a week or a month or a year or 6 years or 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, the body is a pleasure seeking mechanism, right? Like, the more you do it and the more you get into it, the more you're not going to want to skip it. I have a
Yeah.
little prayer and meditation thing that I've been doing for years, and I do it before I'm even off the mattress. Like, it is, I open my eyes and I grab my journal and start. Either I write a letter to God or God writes a letter to me, depending on who needs to say what to whom. Um, uh, so I really want to hear people experimenting with this, and I have a quest for world domination, but we can get to that in a minute if you want.
Oh, I have to follow up with that. And I do for this particular line of questioning, like how do we decide? You
Mm-hmm.
had some pretty helpful questions. I do want to say that out loud. 3 questions that you asked early on. What might I do if I had perfect freedom, if I did not need the money, and I knew no one's feelings would get hurt? I thought that was such a great framing. And to be honest, the last one I didn't even think about. If I knew no one's feelings would get hurt. Can you expand a little bit more of what you mean by that? Because I think I understand what you're saying, that we hold back sometimes because of other people's influences. Is that what you're describing?
That's exactly right. Or sometimes we make up rules inside of our own head. No, my
Yeah,
sister's the pretty one, or my brother's the athletic one, right?
right.
I don't want to get into his territory. It's like, no, you're both, you can both be athletic. That's okay. And you're all very pretty. That's okay. You can be pretty too. For years it
Yeah.
was. I remember this when I wrote a musical. I wrote the script, the book to a musical, and I remember having this sort of feeling inside that I was like, well, I'm not allowed to do this because my first husband was the writer. No, he's the writer. I'm not the
Ah,
writer. He's the writer.
right.
Now, we were already amicably divorced and, moving on. Like, I had this weird contractual obligation that I had made
Yeah.
up inside of my own mind that was keeping me from pursuing something that I was genuinely interested in. And I'm so glad I ended up doing it because it ended up being a really great experience. So yeah, so that question of like, what would I do if I knew no one's feelings would get hurt? If no one would
Yeah.
call me selfish, if no one would think that I thought I was getting too big for my britches or any of that. Let's just remove
Yeah.
some of those constraints.
Right, right. So in this sense, particularly for the past year when you've been really in this particular book, I'm curious, what are your thoughts around like the idea of laziness, or people just saying like, oh, some people are just lazy, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious what your thoughts are around that concept.
I don't buy it. I'm not convinced that there is such a thing. I think that there's resting. I think that there's, what in art we would call white space, right? In graphic design, we would call white space around things that help
Right.
us focus. I think there's fear. I think there's procrastination. I think there's tying your own hands and feet to a concrete block and then saying, oh, I'm so lazy.
Right, right,
It's
right,
like,
right.
no, honey, you've just tied yourself to a concrete block. You're not lazy. You've just made it impossible for you to move forward.
I gotta love your background in theater, performance, and arts and humanities with that one, because the way you write, the little tidbits of human experiences you share are so someone who I feel like has committed themselves to the arts and humanities, the way you observe and what you notice, it all comes from that background. And I have a similar background. So I just want to acknowledge that too. I could really feel that in your writing
Oh,
underneath all of the concepts and everything.
thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of the pieces of advice I remember reading in a book years ago is everything is entertainment. Everything is entertainment. I don't care if you're writing a chemistry textbook. Everything is entertainment. By which I do not mean it has to be light or it has to be funny or it has to be, teary eyed or anything, but it needs to be emotionally engaging. It needs to reflect our human experience. It needs to speak to your belly, not so
Hmm.
much to your mind, but to your belly. So that again, as you're just saying, you sort of have those little flashes of recognition of like, oh, and this is my favorite sound ever. Oh, I love it when people make that sound. Oh, oh, I could do that. Or, oh, I know what she's talking about there. Oh, so for all
Yeah.
you writers out there, that's all we're looking for. Just try to get people to go, oh, cool.
I love that in theater too, because you have a background in improvisation as well. So
I
I
do.
just love how rich your background is in all these areas. It does make me want to ask, overall, what did you take away from your life in theater and the arts? What were some lessons that are still important to you?
Yeah, I still think of myself as an actor. Honestly, it's
Yeah,
weird.
yeah,
It's weird. It's it's been I don't know how many years since I've done it full time. But certainly once an actor, always an actor.
that's true.
Anybody who says that teaching isn't acting is lying, and anybody who says that appearing on 700 different podcasts isn't isn't acting is lying. It's like
Or public speaking,
or
right?
public
Yeah,
speaking. Yes, watch me tell this story as though for the
yeah,
very first time. Um,
right, exactly.
And I also want to sort of put a little asterisk footnote on that, which is for those of you who might have children that are threatening an interest in the performing arts, please encourage them. Do not be afraid. Theater teachers save lives, music teachers save lives, band directors save lives, robotics teachers, like all of that stuff that encourages creative problem solving is so important to the developing mind and the developing person. And particularly in the performing arts, the skills that they will learn are so valuable. First, just being willing to stand up in front of a room of people and speak.
Yeah,
Most
yeah,
people won't even do that. So that alone, even if they go into, corporate, is going to serve them very well. But also what they learn about language, what they learn about presentation, what they learn about energy, what they learn about body language, what they learn about, what in the theater we call ensemble. I think in corporate they call it team or
yeah.
teamwork or something.
Teamwork,
Teamwork.
teamwork. Yeah.
Um, the chances that your child will actually pursue a career in the performing arts is pretty slim. I mean, not many people really go ahead and do that even for more than a year or two. But the skills they will learn, priceless, priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use my theater training and my acting training and my improvisational training every day, all the time.
Yeah, and especially when I've been, as a coach, talking with other like-minded people, often people with a background in the creative fields and things like that. I wish some of these conversations, like your conversation around ways to get things done, I wish I could have been exposed to that earlier. Like in college or theater camp, and to think about the way we approach getting things done. Right. In some ways, I wish the ideas that you have in the book could be presented in like the arts and humanities, because sometimes the way that big projects get things done can at times suck the fun out of it a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Right. I'm being mild with that. But, having spoken to so many artists and thespians, we're just like, there has to be another way.
Well, and this is exactly where my business started. This is exactly where, when I was working full time as an actor in Chicago and then in Los Angeles and
Yeah.
had one of those acting careers that went, well enough that you didn't want to give up on it. I was
Right.
booking, I was working, I had an agent, I'm still a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Like that's
Yes.
all still present, but it was not enough to support me. So I was doing a ton of other jobs and gigs and projects and shows and all the things. And I finally started teaching a class like in a church basement in Van Nuys, California to 11 people. And maybe I was charging them $75 and feeling really, really weird about it. But the whole point of the Get It Done workshop was there isn't a right way. There is not a right way to have an acting career. There's not a right way to be a singer. There's not a right way to be a writer. And there's also not a right way to be a parent or a friend or a lawyer or an executive. There's just your way. And the number of people that I could see who were trying to play by all the rules and not getting very far
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
feeling really frustrated and put upon, like, wait a minute, I did all the things.
Right.
I
Oh,
played by your
man.
stupid rules. How come I'm not getting rewarded? Versus the
Right.
people who go, you know what? I'm out. I'm playing by my rules. I'm playing my
Mm-hmm.
game by my rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then, even if it doesn't go well, which sometimes it doesn't, you at least have had a journey that has fed you and nourished you and brought you to someplace new in your own life.
Yeah, I would say, I was classically trained pianist. So like
Mm.
performance is a part of my life. And I absolutely got anxiety, nerves, had those terrible ones that you want to forget about. And the ones where you're just like, oh my God, I don't deserve all the, just the
Yes.
range. And it wasn't until I was out of thinking about that in an aggressive, I'm going to pursue it way
Mm-hmm.
that I saw like people really struggle with the nerves, containing the nerves. And I thought I was terrible at it. But as someone, when you just have to do it every day and whatnot, you kind of, it's like exposure therapy a little bit. It's the 15 minutes that you have to do every day, or like 15 minutes before every performance or audition, right? And
Yes.
it's like
And
a lot can happen.
a
Yeah.
lot can happen. And I think this skill is so valuable of like, oh no, this has to happen. Opening night is opening night.
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
care what kind of mood you're in, or that you have a migraine, or that your dog just died. None of that matters.
Exactly. Right.
And the ability to compartmentalize, at least a little bit, we don't want to overdo that because that can be psychologically destructive, but the ability to put everything aside and focus and move forward, it's super valuable.
Yeah. Okay. Now I want to ask you about what you hinted at a little bit earlier. What did you mean by world domination and your secret plan to for world domination? Tell me
Yeah.
about
Okay.
that.
Everybody, lean in. Lean in. Okay. Um,
Yeah.
everybody know the secret password? Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right. This is sort of a two-step plan. The first plan is just for everybody, a million people, millions of people, to be spending 15 minutes a day on something that matters to them. I just feel like, I see it. I see it every day. The glow, the light, the progress, the self-esteem, the curiosity, the connections. Like, it's just really wonderful when you are making steady progress on something that matters to you. But I also kind of want people talking about it. I want it to be a regular topic of conversation in the same way that we talk about what we've seen on TV lately, or what we're reading, or where we're going for vacation. And what I really want is for it to become a thing in corporate.
Mm.
Now, I have never had a job in corporate America, so y'all can just tell me, Sam, that'll never happen, it'll never work, and I'll believe you because I don't know. But it seems to me, in my imagination, that when I read things about how 77% of employees are disengaged,
Yeah.
77%? That's like almost everybody. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. And that seems to me to be a very, very expensive problem.
Yes.
If 3/4 of the people who work for me didn't care about what they were doing, didn't care about me, didn't care about doing excellent work, I wouldn't have a business. I'd be sunk. So it seems to me that for a business to say, okay, everybody, between 4:15 and 4:30 is your time. Between 9:45 and 10 a.m. is your time. No meetings. Don't check your email. Don't make your dentist appointments. This is your time for you. Do something that matters to you. Even again, if it's just going out in the courtyard and sitting in the sun for 15 minutes, or taking a walk, or stretching, or picking up your ukulele, or I don't know, whatever you want to do, right?
Yeah.
Working out
Yeah.
that recipe for that new chocolate chip recipe that you want to try out. Whatever it is, something that lights you up. Not only do I think that that would be a really sort of amazing gesture for a business or corporation to say, hey, we know that you are a person who has a life outside of this building, and we want to give you 15 minutes. It's not a lot of time to just to lean into that a little bit. And what I know from my own experience, and certainly studies show, that when you let people bring in the fullness of themselves to work, they do better. They have better ideas. They're more connected. Problem solving is more innovative. Their cognition is better. They put together more unusual ideas. Even just, if you're having a meeting and everybody has to introduce themselves, rather than just saying, oh, hi, I'm Sam from sales,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
say, Hi, I'm Sam from sales, and my grandmother moved to this country from Sweden when she was 17, and I make my own chai masala spice mix,
Yeah.
right? I don't care, anything. Again, studies show that that meeting will be more productive. People will be more engaged. They'll have better ideas because they're not just thinking with their Sam from sales hat on. They're thinking from the fullness of themselves.
Right. Right.
And then we start to build those connections. And now all of a sudden, that person down at the end of the table is not, that person Debbie from accounting that I've never cared for. Debbie, all of a sudden I find out that Debbie does cross stitch. I'm like, oh, I do needlepoint. We're needlework friends. Like, right? The more you know about who someone is as a person, the easier it is to relate to them. The more you find you have in common, the more now we're not just talking about
Yeah.
this program or this task or this thing, but we actually have a human relationship with one another. And you know what that is? That's called engagement.
So you basically want to bring theater camp, the culture of theater camp,
Yes.
to the corporate space and be
I
like,
want
hey,
to play
guess
a
what?
little
We're still alive.
I want to play a little zip zap zop at the top of the
Yeah.
meeting. I wanted to like have us wiggle like worms, little diaphragmatic breathing, maybe sing some scales. No, I think that would be amazing. But
I would be up for it. And not to mention so many wonderful people I know who are in corporate have that other side. And then it's like, hey, I have 10 years under my belt with the guitar.
right.
And I was like, nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. You know what I mean? But it's like, how can we
Absolutely.
fully express ourselves? And sometimes it's 15 minutes at a time.
I have a friend who I met I met him when he was a theater director. He ended up with kind of a big career in Apple. And he said,
Mm.
I can always tell when I'm interviewing people who has performance spheres and who doesn't.
Yeah, we're all over the place. We're in
We're all
like
over the
every
place. And he's
field.
like, just the way people carry themselves, the way they,
Yeah.
again, what they learn about listening, about body language, about self management, about managing your nerves
Yeah.
and your anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Which is epic. And he said he thought it should be mandatory, like the Peace Corps, like everybody has to spend 2 years in the performing arts.
Can you imagine? That'd be amazing.
That'd be
Like,
amazing. I'm all for it. And you don't have to be on stage. You can be backstage. You can do costumes. You can run lights. I don't care.
yeah, it's so funny that so many ways that modern society is trying to push for more productivity can oftentimes is leading to the opposite in some ways. And I think that's what you're sort of picking up of, how many times can we bang our head against that wall before
Yeah.
you say, like, maybe we try a different activity, right?
And I notice that we do things for other people.
Right.
I mean, as much as, yeah, we work for the paycheck. Oh, yeah, we work for the recognition but mostly we do things for other people. My nephew is 14 and he's a theater kid because he's secretly my child. And I asked him, he's this wonderful youth theater program. And I said, what do you like about it? What are you getting out of it? And he goes, I just like hanging with my friends. I just like being with my friends. And I just melted 1,000 meltings. And, when I was growing up, we didn't have all this diagnoses. We were just the weird kids. We were just weird. And
Yeah.
to have a room and with other weird kids where it's okay to be weird. And then to be an adult and realize, you know what? Yes, weird for sure. Like everybody.
Yeah.
Point out to me the not weird person, please. Yeah, doesn't exist. And you start to realize, oh, wait a minute. I'm not too sensitive. I'm not too energetic. I'm not too talkative. I'm not too sarcastic. I'm not too disrespectful. I'm not too quiet and shy. No, I'm just sensitive and sarcastic and disrespectful and shy. I'm all of those things. And it's not a character defect.
Right. And you speak about that so beautifully in the book, maybe your areas of weakness or the things that you don't like about yourself can actually be transmuted or transformed into something that can benefit you, into a strength, into something that gets you ahead in a different scenario or in a different way. And you kind of talk about with this another phrase besides world domination, the alchemy of effort. I love for you to kind of talk a little bit about what you mean by that and that word effort. Why do you love that word so much?
Yeah, originally it was the alchemy of art, but I didn't want to freak people out. So, because so many.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because there's a terrible, terrible, terrible collapsement that has happened in the world between the words creative and artistic.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. Everyone is creative. Creativity has to do with innovative problem solving, right? So you can be a creative IT director, you can be a creative gardener, you can be right? Creativity is part of our birthright as part of who we are as humans. Everyone is creative. Not everyone is artistic, right? So stop saying, oh, I'm not creative, I'm not creative, I'm not creative. Yeah, you are. The way you raise that toddler,
Mm,
believe me, you are creative. You know,
I see. I
right?
see.
The way you
Right.
plan that camping trip, you are creative. The way you
Right.
the way you realtors sell that house, you are creative. You are
Yeah.
finding
The way
new
you
ways,
resolve that conflict, you really had to think outside the box. Yeah, exactly.
right? So that. So yeah, I didn't want to scare people off with the word art because so many people go, "Oh no, that's not me."
Oh,
Um,
I love that.
but effort, we all make an effort, and the alchemy of effort um, has to do with, you have an idea, and currently it is hermetically sealed inside of your mind, and it's not doing anyone any good
Hmm.
because only you can see it, and you're probably torturing yourself with it a little bit. The minute you put it on paper or get it out into the world in some way, it changes. It's not the same thing you had in your head. It's different because now it's real. And so it's different. And then you're a little different because now you've had the experience of doing it. And that's changed you. And that's alchemical, right? We're turning lead into gold. And now let's say you even let somebody else see it. And they have a thought and an opinion. So they are changed. And then the thing itself is changed. And then you are changed because of their reaction to the thing. And now we get this sort of infinity loop, this sort of Moebius strip of I
Mm.
do a thing and the thing happens, and then you see the thing and the thing changes, and then I see the thing change and your reaction. Like we get this
Oh my God.
beautiful
Call and
flow going.
response, right?
Call
A
and
little.
response. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like you do that little by little, and where you get to, you could not have arrived there without all the little connections in between.
Exactly. Exactly. And as long as it stays locked inside of your head, yes, there is that perfect version,
Mm.
but it's not creating change. It's not turning things into gold. It's not. And we all know we've all done it. We've, made stuff that in the moment you think, well, that's terrible. That's going to have to get thrown away. That's a big mistake. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, or a couple years later, or a couple of decades later, you go, oh, you know what? That actually was really interesting. That something really happened there, where that was a lot better than I thought it was.
Yeah, I have some like piano tunes. And I was like, you know what? Why was I so hard on myself? It's not like I was trying to like top charts or something. Like, this is cool. I made this. But it does take that
Right. And it was
reframing.
part of your journey as an artist, and to look back with a little more self-love and self-compassion and go like, hey, look at me trying something new, and
Yeah.
and being willing to take a flyer and fail. Here's another like stealth world domination. All of my books have poetry in them. And no
Ah,
one ever mentions it, and my publishers have never said anything about it. I just think that books need poetry, so I just put them in, and it seems fine. And the poems, particularly in this second book, and Start Right Where You Are, those came like as a download.
mm-hmm.
We've all had that experience where something just shows up, like you're not even writing it, you're just transcribing it, like it just arrives full and complete in your mind. So first of all, don't refuse the download, people. If you've got one of those ideas where you're like, I don't know why, I just have this idea for a 5-volume set of novels set in ancient Greece. So I don't know why, and I don't like writing, and I'm not interested in ancient Greece. It's like, no, that's your download. Just don't. That's it. That's your engraved invitation from God. Don't
Yeah, that's your 15
don't
minutes.
ignore it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
your minute. So those poems arrived as a download, and my own personal judgment on them, like, these aren't very good. But
Right,
I
right.
also know I am a terrible judge of my own work.
Yeah,
You are a terrible judge of your own work.
right.
Everyone is a terrible judge of their own work. It is not your job to judge your work, particularly before you do it. It is your job to be the vessel to just transmit, and sometimes those downloads are, I wonder how my cousin Sue is doing. That's a download. Call Sue,
Mm.
right? Don't be the person 3 months from now who goes, oh shoot, I really should have called her, right? You get those little niggles, those little inspiration, those little finger tapping on your shoulder. Yeah, pay attention to that.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of writing, I speak with a lot of writers specifically, but also like artists, musicians, performers. But I love for you to speak to writers for a second, because I love what you shared at the beginning of our conversation about your journey with this particular book. You said, I had to get her done in a year. It was when I was not able to be at my prime optimal performance output, right? As someone
Mm-hmm,
who's authored
mm-hmm.
all the previous books. And here you are. So
Yeah.
I know so many writers over the past few years, who, myself included, who have struggled with getting back into the love and the groove of creativity and creative output. And
Mm-hmm.
hearing your story was just a little bit inspiring, actually, because you were very frank about, yeah, this is about getting things done, but you talk about anxiety, depression, long COVID, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, anything at all that you want to say to writers about the journey of starting a project like this, or any words of wisdom, perhaps?
Yeah, the one thing I want to say to writers, I mean, really all creators, but writers, I think especially, is I hear this like, oh, I haven't been writing, I haven't been writing, I have this, I haven't been working on it. It's like, yeah, you have,
Mm,
you have, you've been writing, you just haven't been writing it down, but you're writing all the time. That's what I notice about writers is we write all the time. We are constantly narrating inside of our head. We are constantly observing things, watching things, going, oh, how would I say that? Oh, how would I, like it's just that's what we do. We love to put words to things. We love to, that's um, so quit saying you're not writing because you are.
mm,
And and if you're not writing it down, for crying out loud, start writing it down. And maybe that means making a voice memo. Maybe that means doing a screen recording. Maybe that means, partnering with a friend and talking it out. Maybe that means note cards and index cards. And I mean, that's how I wrote my first book, was just index cards.
mm-hmm,
Because I had that feeling of like, okay, I knew I wanted to write the Get It Done book, but then I was immediately sort of paralyzed of like, well, but I don't know what kind of book it should be. Like, should it be a series of exercises? Should it be like a workbook? Maybe it should be like one person's journey through the Get It Done experience. Like, is it an allegory? I don't know. And then I remembered, oh, that's right. It doesn't need to be perfect before I start. So I just started carrying around index cards. And anytime I had a thought about something that I thought should be in the book, I put it on an index card. I'd put it in the big manila envelope on my desk that I labeled genius. And then after a couple of weeks, I spilled them all out onto my dining room table and just started to see how they clumped up. I was like, oh, here's all the stuff about perfectionism, and here's all the stuff about how to get your work out into the world, and here's all the stuff about self-doubt, and here's all the and then I sort of let the book tell me what it wanted to be, right? So I guess that would be the other thing I would say is, please, writers, stop trying to manhandle your projects and be in dialogue with that. Like, imagine your project in your mind and feel that energetic connection that you have to it,
mm,
right? Your project picked you, and it's not leaving you alone. You've had a million other ideas that have come and gone, no big deal. But there are some that are like, they're still tapping on your shoulder. And it's not meant to make you feel bad. It's meant to say, hey, I'm still here. Hey, let's do this thing. Hey, I like you. Let's make a thing. you know? Like, so get into energetic partnership with it. And remember, yeah, you don't need to have it be perfect. And I was pretty much done with the manuscript for 15-minute Method.
mm-hmm,
Had handed it back to the publishers, and they edited it and sent it back to me.
mm-hmm,
And I was reading it and reading their notes, and they did not have very extensive notes. There wasn't that much to change. And I called my sister, who's the best person in the world, and I was like, I have a big problem. I said, I have written a terrible book. Like, I'm wondering if I can get out of the contract. And she
wow.
goes, okay. Does anyone else think it's terrible? Like, your publisher or your editor? And I said, no, they seem to think it's fine. And she goes, okay. So, again, maybe you're not the best judge of your own work. Maybe you're an unreliable narrator in this situation. And I said, I will agree to that. That's entirely possible. I said, and I will tell you right now, there's something wrong with this book. And I'm not entirely sure what it is, and I don't really know how to fix it.
Hmm.
So I banged my head against it for a while. And then finally, I did something I've never done before, which is I threw up my hands and I sent it back to my editor, and I said, this book has a fatal flaw. This book has a problem. And I think the problem is what in comedy we would call a running order problem.
Oh, wow.
The structure of the book is not right. So it doesn't read properly. Like, And the only example is I had, there's a couple of stories in the book that are very personal.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, those had all sort of ended up in the latter part of the book. So I
Yeah.
felt like, so the book sort of starts one way, but then it kind of takes a big left turn, and it just feels really just not right. It just didn't flow properly. I said, so I think that's the problem, but I don't know how to fix it. And this was mortifying to me to stand there and go, my book has a problem and I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And they said, okay. And I was like, so I need you to be editors. I need you to do your job of editing. And sure enough, they were like, okay, we hear you. And they were like, I see your point. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, let's move this here and let's divide this thing into two. And maybe we could just get rid of this part entirely because maybe this isn't serving, And we moved some things around. And then I was like, oh, now I love this book. Now I am proud of this book. But that was a big that was a big uncharted walk through the Mojave for me of like, I got no landmarks. I don't know how to fix this. And I don't know how to ask for help to fix it.
Thank you for sharing this. This is the kind of stuff that I know like fellow authors love hearing this. It's so humanizing, right? But I know it can be vulnerable to share these things at the same time. So I really appreciate it. But you know what I heard? I was like, that's why this book reads like you're from the arts and humanities. Because I don't know, something about the way you described it. I was like, well, that's very human. And you kind of like turned it into a book.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And the thing, and again, the transferable skills, I worked at Second City for a long time and did a lot of sketch comedy writing and sketch comedy work. You learn a couple of things along the way. Like, you have to teach the audience how to behave. So if you want suggestions from the audience, you better ask for it in the first couple of minutes of the show. Because if you let them sit in silence for 20 minutes and then say, okay, we need a suggestion of a location, they're not going to say anything. Same thing with your meetings. If you're the boss, you come in and you run this meeting about, here's the big idea, here's the big idea, here's big, and that's half an hour. And then you say, I'd really love your feedback. They're going to stare at you nobody's going to say anything because you have trained them to not say anything.
Right.
So if you want their response, if you want them to laugh at your jokes, make a joke and make them laugh right away. If you want call and response, you better get that call and response going right away. You want people to share and be vulnerable, you got to start with that. You got to set that up right at the beginning. There's and then there's other things like the second scene in a show. You can almost put anything there. Like, it's not a bad place to sort of bury a scene that's not that great, because they're in it. Like, they've seen the first scene, they're all like, yeah, okay. And then we see, like in Broadway, then there's the 11 o'clock number that comes, that big. It's great. You learn a lot of things about structure from other art forms.
I love this conversation. You remind me a little bit of Elaine May and Mike Nichols, that comedy duo. Like,
okay, excuse me while I fall down from joy of the best compliment I've ever gotten in my whole life.
I discovered them when I was in school, and I loved that class. It was kind of like a history of media type of thing, and I just loved it. And my highlight by far was getting to experience and read the comedy of Mike Nichols and watch, actually, I should say, Mike Nichols and Elaine May. And when I was reading your book, that's kind of what it reminded me of, the way you observe people. It's like the way that people who can write comedy, humor, find things that make everybody laugh. It's that skill set, I suppose, which, growing up, I wouldn't even call it that. It's just goofing around. But here we are,
Well, they're from Second City. That's where they started, was at the Second City in Chicago.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah. But it's the heartbreak of my life that I will never make a movie with Mike Nichols. Elaine May's still around, though, so I may...
Oh, is she?
I may have to find... Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I may have to find her one of these days. But yeah, they're amazing, and their work is amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of their duo-ship as much because I think it was a little after. And then, kind of knew Mike Nichols as director. Anyway, I just love the way that you infused that part of your background into the book, from the alchemy of effort to collaborating to just the power of 15 minutes, which, again, I just think if you are in that world, you understand how you can just like turn it on in 15 minutes and whatnot. And even the power of humor. So thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to highlight about the 15-minute method or just the nature of getting things done that we haven't discussed yet?
I'm still swooning from the Elaine May Mike Nichols thing. So
no, that was a tactic. No, just kidding.
I'm a little overcome because I've just admired them for so long, and no one's ever said that to me. The thing I really want to say is, please try it. don't let this be one of those things that you read and go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that sometime. I should try that sometime. Like, no, do it. Do it. We've got a thing, you can see it on my website. It's called the Daily Practicum. And it's a subscription thing. People pay for it. And every weekday at 12 noon Eastern, so 9 Pacific, 5 British Summer Time, we get on Zoom, say hi, turn on the timer, 15 minutes, timer goes off, everybody lifts their head up, and they have this like incredible post-orgasmic glow. And they're so pleased. And they're like, and we don't talk a lot. I mean, it's not a big chit-chat session, but but sometimes people want to report in and they go, I did it. I called that person that I've been putting off calling for 6 weeks.
Okay. Yes. Right.
I did it. I took this pile of paper is now this much smaller.
Right.
I did it. I wrote a note to my friend who lost her husband and I didn't know what to say and I'd been putting it off, but I did it. I wrote that note. I did it. I did the thing. I practiced my guitar. I did my singing. I took a walk. I spent 15 minutes communing with my animal. I did my needle, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. Just they're so suffused with joy. And it just works. I mean, it just works. And even if, and I can hear people, they're like, well, but my project is so big, I've got to clean out the entire garage. I can't do that in 15 minutes. No, you can't. And I will also tell you that this story you have going on in your head of like, well, I will do it. I just need 2 free weekends in a row. And then I'm going to clean out the garage. Really? 2 free weekends in a row?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Show me those on the calendar, would you? What is that happening?
Right.
Because that's not happening. And even if you did have 2 free weekends in a row, you're not going to want to spend it cleaning out the garage.
Right.
But can you take your mug of coffee and tea and go sit in the garage for 15 minutes and just contemplate the garage? What's really there? Is it really a problem? Sometimes people are like, oh, I've got so much stuff. Well, okay, maybe. Is that a problem? Is it a health hazard? Or are things getting ruined? I mean, sometimes it's a problem. So just contemplate for 15 minutes. And then maybe the next day you go and contemplate again. And you go, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, those 9 boxes, those are my brother's. Hold on. Like, call your brother and he gets the 9 boxes. And look, now half of the garage is cleared and you didn't have to do anything. Right? Like, just get into it. And then if you hate it and it's not working, do something else. Like, switch gears. And what if I don't do it every day? Fine, you did it 3 days. That's 3 more days than you did, in the last 3 years. So feel good about it.
Talk about the power of humor. I was like, humor and coaching can really go well together. Sometimes you just got to not beat about the bush, but in some ways that brevity is kind of helpful.
Yeah, the humor allows you to say things that you probably couldn't otherwise say.
Yeah. Right.
But it also reflects a shared value system.
Yeah.
Right? What's the old saying, right? It's funny because it's true. So, and I always say that, when I'm teaching entrepreneurship, which I do sometimes, and we're talking about ideal client, I'm like, my ideal client laughs at my jokes, partly because I'm a fool for compliments and my ego is immeasurable, like everybody's, but also because it reflects a shared value system.
Right.
And when you don't have to share all the values across the board, but if you don't, it's like being in a relationship with somebody that like you don't have quite the same values, and like they give you a present and you're like, why did you get me this? Or you try to do something nice for them and they don't really notice and you're like, hey, I did something important, nice for you. And they're like, oh, I guess I didn't really, like, you're just not going to connect. It's not going to work.
Right.
And it's the same in intimate relationships as it is in client relationships. Like, but if you share the same value system, we can make more progress, we can tell more truth, and we have a lot more grace for one another. If I screw up and I can say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I totally screwed up, and they're going to go, I get it. I mean, it's not cool that you screwed up. That's not good, but I understand that happens. So we can move on from there. We can make this right? Be on the same page.
Right.
Be on the same team with people.
The art of connection in some ways, right? And so much can be drawn from the 15-minute method. So that's why I was so looking forward to today's conversation. And I'll be sure to hyperlink, where people can find you, where people can order the book. Thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for the conversation. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Robert.
Thank you.